In this video, we are going to look at the basics of functions. Let's go take a look. So functions were introduced in the last module, just kind of a precursor to this module. As you know, this chapter is pretty much about how to use functions. Here's some basics that you need to know. First, you have to define a function by putting the first three letters, define, DEF, make up some name. Name doesn't matter. You can make up any name you want. Put a couple parentheses there and a colon. After that, you group one or more statements inside. You can have hundreds of statements if you want, or you can just have one statement. It's really up to you. You need to define it before you call it. If you don't define it first, it won't work. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. So I'm going to come over here and paste that code in, and it should work. And it does. Now if I go ahead and move this up here, it won't work. Now that's not common in many languages. In many languages you can actually define it after and call it before. This seems a little weird perhaps, but the reason is that in those other languages the entire script loads into memory before it even starts to run. Python's not doing that apparently. It's actually loading things as it goes and then runs after when it hits the particular line you're working with. It doesn't really matter all that much how it does it. The fact is that what it does is you have to define a function before you use it. And the name I gave it could have been something as silly as X. You can make up any name you want. Still works the same way. Python's Python has naming conventions that they want you to use. Let's see, what are you complaining about? Expected 2 blank lines, found 1. Okay. Oh, that's another one up there. What's another one up top? Also, they want you to come on, you'll see them complain about wanting everything to be lowercase. I've never found that to be a good format. There's a lot of things I don't agree with their format. So the idea is that it would be process something. Well, you know, I gotta say, it just doesn't look right. And of course, this is a case-sensitive language, so that's not going to work. So if you see other people typing it in a different way, that's perfectly fine. Just be aware that you don't have to agree with the way they do things. I certainly don't agree with this one. Okay, it's still working. Cool. Now, many functions will have parameters. Parameters allow you to pass values into the function for processing. And the same kind of rules apply. There's a naming convention that goes along with them. You just make up a name and then you use them. And the parameters go within the parentheses here. And then whenever you go through and call the function, you use them by the parameters by passing in an argument. So, process something, I'll go through and make a new parameter. I call it parameter 1, P1. And I want to, I don't know, I'll concatenate that on. P1. And then, to call the function, if I don't pass in the parameter, it gives me an error message. I'm missing a argument. Now, arguments are values that you pass in to parameters. Oops, it wants a string. Now it's happy. So arguments get passed into parameters. Let's say I made a variable called argument1. I pass in works as expected. The variable A1 gets filled up with BBB, and then A1, the variable, gets used as an argument. Now, the argument in this case is a variable, but its job description on line 9 is that it's acting as an argument. P1 is a parameter. It is a variable also, but its job description, what it's actually action it's performing, is it's acting as a parameter. So parameters are just variables that are part of the function's definition. They provide a way of passing in values, or should I say passing in arguments. You will hear people call the parameters arguments. You will hear people call the arguments parameters. That is slang. It is incorrect, but people still use it, and you just have to kind of move on with your life. Just forgive them. It's not that big a deal. If somebody calls the argument a parameter, or somebody calls a parameter an argument, just realize that they're just using slang. And you'll find that all over the internet. And of course, you also hear people say that in real life too. Now, there's no practical limit to how many parameters you have. So let's say I go through and I use 2 parameters. I pass in 2 arguments into this function I called add values. The 10 gets passed into the first parameter, the 5 gets passed into the second parameter. I add the 2 values together and print out the sum of the 2 values is 15. This is just a variable defined or declared inside of the function. But these are special variables. They're parameters. Parameters are just variables that are being used as parameters. This is just a regular old variable inside the function. They refer to this as a local variable. It's local to the function. Outside of that, let's make sure I got it spelled right. It doesn't know what decimal answer is. The reason for that is that this local variable is local to the function itself. It's defined inside of it, and this is not inside the function, it's outside the capsule that is the function. The function represents a complete capsule of code. This is outside that capsule. Best thing to do is try to work with it. So we're going to take a look at a lab here, working with functions, and see how you do. I'll see you there.